Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is Jonas Reportus for the 13th, and it's not a Friday, so I guess that makes it okay. But all we are is literally pretty much at the same resistance point we've been at for a while. We're above the ABM gold level, which right here was about 27.80. We had an intraday resistance around 93 that we've been trading back and forth, and we're pretty much static with this same location from, well, all the way back into February. We've just been sliding back and forth, and we had that little dip down to this level right down here at the 27.35 range, and every time we get to it, it's found support there and popped right back above it. And we can see that once we got above the 70.62, there's nothing in the way until literally the 100% level here, all the way up at the 28.25 if we look at the 100%. And it was a pretty significant dip. The significant turnaround was a little early for, well, I mean, it literally, you could see it intraday happening, and then it's just continued through here. We're actually just about to get the potential of a crossover of the yellow over magenta on a shakeout standpoint. So it has the potential to actually break out from the range. We do have the dip below the red line that took place right back here. Technically, I've revisited most of it by touching that 27.35, so don't look to that as a huge thing, but we have so many positive extremes on the other time frames. Given if we look at the 50K real quick, you can see all the way going back to the beginning of this run, all the way back at the 35, we have a positive extreme movement on the 50K. Even as it crossed over and turned around, that was the earliest point we had our moves. We can see that we were building that P2. We talked about that the other day, and literally just hovering right there at the peak. We had our first indication of DOC spread with the cyan moving above red. It was still above zero. That finally changed right about now, and we're starting to see a little cave over of the gold that has been just, you know, in constant rise mode. So this is going to become our first critical test of how much support this has, because when we get that azure, meaning the gold, we'll have a clear idea of whether or not we reach the end of the run. We're not dipping below red line or anything on this reset, but what it does is it gives you complete reset of the DOC, meaning not overbought at this particular point like we were as we were moving up into the top portion. It's just kind of consolidating within that move, and that's interesting because you're getting what would be a perfect configuration once we had the dip right here of orange going below the steel, and that steel crossing up above the cyan. So it all took place right at the same time on that well, GAM colored candle that you can see right there, and pretty much holding within that at this particular point. And this literally was a representation of early on at the beginning of the month, where you start to look for fun money around the 4th or 5th, but they kind of held off on it until they could get a better price. And as soon as they hit that key algo, that attracted the institutional, and that's what literally the run for the short cover really creates those pops. NASDAQ we already knew was much stronger in general. It had already held its support much higher level and actually breaking into the new high range. So we're actually getting a pop at 72.39, and now we moved up to 72.50 for the 100%. So actually making a new high. So even the fact that the lows are rising from a Morganachi standpoint, the fact that you're making a new high is not looking for that to come crawling back. The support within the euro, of course, continued failure on the Brit exit situation, but the belief that there's going to be an extension, maybe that it's going to even end and they'll actually have a deal. There's been some flexibility with these final days, so I'm getting an optimism trade coming back in to the euro, still not having any real significant growth configuration in the euro whatsoever. Also from gold, after its reset of matching that dip below the red line, it too actually is now seeing actually green above cyan. We had the crossover of shakeout gold, so that's in line with where it's headed return-wise. From an intraday standpoint, you know, it just depends on where you were. If you're still in from that original pop-up, we knew that we were going to get some action right around this 93, a little bit back and forth, and it's literally all that took place. We dipped below it briefly on what was a reasonable breakdown from the DOC standpoint. We had a lot of activity above the plus 13.5 with the orange in that, and that gave us just a brief dip, but immediately produced, you know, the new turnaround, and that got us, well, pretty much fluctuating back and forth, and then we had some pops with cyan under red, and that. What was more interesting is that the fact that once we started making these new highs, you'll notice that we weren't getting that red above zero, and so these DOC short signals become a little more interesting. Even in this case where it popped up again, it's still revisited further down, and it's just a matter of sticking with it, because what happened was the first high, you get your short signal, then we made a, well, actually new high, but on the much lower shakeout, and so that rejection from a short snake actually produced a little bit more. Still above that 93, you're still fighting the fact that they're supporting along that lines. We're not getting any deep red or anything like that showing up on the extreme histograms, and so we literally just kind of traded across there till the end of the day, but you can see we were never getting any red above zero. So to me, this is one of those where they're kind of liquidating inside of the overall buy configuration, because the late buyers are coming in because they're still seeing new highs being made, but we're catching the lower DOC readings, and sure enough, that led to a move right back to the 93, and again that 93 became attractive on the bullish side, because this exact inverse of the short snake, the bullish snake, taking place right there. And even if you wait a little bit until you get a P2 configuration, I don't have any objection to that kind of setup too, because it's kind of choppy, and in that kind of chop mode, you really are looking at these algo levels, because it just makes it a little bit easier to stick with it for me from the longer side of it. Now I would be actually having stops moving up more towards the bottom of this range. It was in the low 70s before, but now much higher, simply because you're starting to see a little tapering off. Likewise on the 50K, like we were just looking at before, where you can see that we finally have that dip below the zero from a DOC red standpoint, meaning that the potential of, if I'm making new highs now and I'm at a lower shakeout, it's likely that I'm going to see continued resistance. And of course, it depends on how far this red dips. If you get a dip, especially if it dips below the negative 13.5, it just gives you more range within what is a short configuration. Of course, you have the steel reset, so it isn't going to take much for short-term buyers to just lift that right back up, and that will break it out to a new high range. So in my mind, this is just more of a continuation that finally reached its peak as we noticed it from the DOC stopped making moves above the zero line. So it just sort of lets you know that there's been some selling within that, and that's worth taking into account. It's been a nice run from that original 5K. We have to go all the way back to how far back that was. It was just like really all the way back into here, the small dip, and then boom, and just nothing to do with it for well, an entire day plus. Literally didn't get even a return back to the zero until just early part of the morning there. And again, that was, like I said, right around that 93, which was going to be a significant player. And that's where we're currently right now. We had dipped below it, kind of testing anyone who had too tight stop within that normal deviation. Not too far off where this dip was actually even a little bit better than this dip, because the low over here didn't even quite get down to that. It just got to the meat of these closes. So, and that was on a full DOC reset. Yeah, pretty much likewise the exact same thing right at that level, and turned it around. So again, that 93 going up to the 2803 has been sort of a blockage range right in that just over the 28. We had expected that 2820 from the original high that would, from the breakout standpoint, cause a resistance, that we would come back to the breakout, and that would give us the reset. And that's pretty much exactly how things have played out. So I think it's going to be pretty straightforward going forward here, particularly if we see a move back above zero. Then it would say that they've completed their selling. When I say back to zero, I mean from the red DOC. At this particular point, this was the previous high was at negative 528, and we're currently sitting at negative 549. If that breaks out above it, then you'll at least have cleared that other previous hurdle, and then I would expect that it's got to move above the zero. And if it doesn't, then I'll be looking for that to come all the way back down. You can see we've already developed one positive extreme for around the 95 level. So entirely consistent with generally bullish. That's sort of lost a little bit of its steam, and it's consolidating, and that's par for the course given what we've seen from the early move. So we'll just keep taking it from there. There really wasn't anything significant to talk about, given that this was just a collection range off of that big move. But now we're getting to a point where breaks of the 2788 certainly become more interesting, and I'm going to be, from a long standpoint, much tighter on the stop as it gets towards that 93, and certainly taking profits up around the 28 whenever you have the beginnings of a sell signal is certainly worth doing, because you can always re-enter at that peak level and recycle it from there. So as always, I will put up relevant stuff on the Skype chat. Trade well.